All right, everybody, here we go. Let's get started. The sound's working fine. Let me take a sip from my tea. All right, here we go. I'll give you guys a second to get started on the stream. We're doing today. What is today? Well, today is Japanese Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, and how are we going to get there? Well, it's not going to just be me talking about the details. That's probably more boring than you think it may be. We're going to talk about Gyo. If you did not read it yet, it is an e-reserve. If you don't know how to do an e-reserve, we literally have, I actually helped us set it up. If you look in the announcements page on the Discord, there is a link to how to do it, just so you guys know. All right. And somebody's saying stream Fortnite. I don't know about that, maybe. You don't know how bad I am at video games or not. All right. So let's get started. Okay, today, let's jump on in. Okay, so we're doing Japanese Buddhism Zen, obviously. Oh, there's a little hiccup. You get to see my background again, and another hiccup. That's fine. Got this fancy laser pointer I'm going to try to use. So today we are going to talk about Japanese Buddhism. This is our last day of Buddhism. And after this, we're going to get into St. Augustine. That's next class. All right. Somebody says I should critique historical games while playing them. Sure, during the summer. I've been known to do that in my life, but mostly I subject my friends to it. Okay, so let's jump on in. So, more pictures. Yeah, today obviously we're doing Japanese Buddhism. Some more of the pictures will be Buddhist in nature. A reminder, questions I will answer at the end of the slide. You can type them in the chat for Twitch, which is easier for me to see, or you can type them in the Discord for the class. Another channel won't be as easy for me to see. So please type them there if you have questions. And at the end of the slide, I will do my best to answer them. We're going to start with Japanese Buddhism. Next slide, we're going to jump right into Gyo. So if you have your copy of the PDF, now is the time to take a look at it. If you don't have it, it's free and easy to download, and it's fair use. So please take a look. And I'm going to get to my page and get ready to go. So Japanese Buddhism, what are some of the traits and the stuff we know about it? Well, if you don't know anything else about it, first, it came to Japan in the 6th century AD. Now, you might ask, where did it come from, Professor? That's a great question. It came from China, as a lot of things do. So, again, it's not an inflation of the Chinese mind to just be like, yeah, that's where it came from. Welcome. So today in the world, you could argue Japan has the most varied Buddhism today. What we just mean is the pure amount of types. There's a lot of types of Buddhism in Japan. It's inevitable. There's so many kinds, and we're only doing historical Buddhism right now. Now, when you think of variety, think about like America and Protestant denominations. You have a little bit of an idea of how many Buddhist denominations there are in Japan. A healthy number would be the answer. Now, this is interesting. Why are there so many forms? Well, generally speaking in Japan, there's this here. There's a general reaction to establishment religion, basically whenever a religion gets tied to a certain government. When that government either gets old or collapses or the Buddhism gets too relaxed, it tends to reform, and then there's new forms of Buddhism trying to be pure. And somebody's asking, I'll answer it here. Somebody else has already had typing form. Yes, use the stream. People will figure this out. It's their first time, it's fine. So the new and reformed forms is where we just keep getting new elaborations. Now, how important is it? Well, to give you some scale, Japan has about 126 million people. And here we go. So this is 80% Shinto and 67% Buddhist. We're not going over Shinto. It's basically nature worship. It's quite interesting. It's its own class, and I don't have time to go over it too much. We'll talk about it a little bit today later, but we're mostly talking about the Buddhism, which is about 70%. And somebody asks, didn't Buddhism get transferred to Japan from Korea? We could say it's a depends on who you ask question. A lot of the Japanese transmission was simultaneous. What I mean is, when they went abroad in the 6th century to get ideas, they did both go to Korea and China, but a lot of the direct monk transmission was from China. And I didn't say all of it. There's a lot of Korean transmission too. And from the 6th century to now, a lot of the Chinese interaction has been between Japanese and Koreans. They're closer they're more closely related, their languages are more similar. So a lot of times Japanese would go to Korea as well to get like an update of the Chinese tradition, but strictly speaking, both Korea and Japan use Chinese forms of Buddhism. That's what basically Mahayana is. That's a good question. And again, any other questions, this is the end of the slide. So feel free to type them either place. All right. So moving on to an example. Now, I could just try to explain, and in the past I have been known to do this, explain all the little specificities of Japanese Buddhism, but instead, this is why I made us read Gyo. So if you haven't read Gyo yet, this slide won't make sense, and we'll come back to it. So Gyo is a Buddhist story, and it comes from a book called The Tale of the Heike. Actually, I have my PDF I can just show you guys. Here we go. For everybody who's never taken my class, I'm going to just show it. Here we go. So Tale of the Heike, and I'll use the Royal Tyler translation if you're curious. So Tale of the Heike is an epic. What I mean is, we don't have the whole table of contents. It's 700 pages? Hold on. 677 pages of stuff. Now, it's mostly, if you've never seen it, I'm going to show you an example. If you and any of the students who've read it, you might have noticed the indents here are very different. Now, why? I have an example page here. Basically, this is an adaptation of a sung tradition. It's chanted, said, and sung. So each indent, if you look on the stream, you can see this, right? This is prose, which just means it's just narration, right? This next level in is chanting, but not singing. And this third indent is what is purely sung. Now, you might be like, Professor, what does that even mean? Like, you say it's sung, I don't get it. Well, lucky for you, I, as a hobby, may have just, I might have a CD of what this music sounds like. It's one of the oldest concurrent traditions, actually, singing the Tale of the Heike. And I'll give you about it might strike my channel, but I'll give you about a minute of this so you can hear what it sounds like. This is how it's traditionally rendered. Oh, let me turn on that. And if you notice, there's no natural place to interrupt it because it's just very long, flowing music. So I'll probably just interrupt in the middle. So this comes from a CD. I'm stopping it now, sorry folks. It comes from a CD that is just 6 discs of Tale of the Heike. I'm nerdy enough, I asked my in-laws for it for Christmas, I think. So, yeah, and so this is Buddhist chanting. So the guy is actually a blind Buddhist monk, and for 800 years they would chant this stuff. So the original format, if you noticed, it looks weird. It's because it's intended to be sung and chanted, not read. It's weird to read it, but that's one reason we're using it. It's a much more interesting explanation. And by the way, if you already read the book, did I get a question already? Not yet. So we're getting a lot of comments. So yeah, it does sound like somebody mentions it sounds like chants you hear in Khmer temples and whatnot. Yeah, exactly. The guy's a Buddhist monk. So if it sounds like a chant, it's because the guy's literally a monk. It's his job. So yeah, this is a picture, by the way, of when they become monks, but we'll talk about that in a sec. So if you didn't read the story yet, I highly recommend it. We're going to talk about the story, and what we can kind of infer from what is Mahayana Buddhism from the way these people live. Somebody asks, is there a similarity between early religious music? Yes, actually, if I was reading the introduction of this book, and the translator says, Tale of the Heike is the oldest, what did she say? The oldest continuous music tradition, which is actually untrue. Gregorian chant is about 500 years to 700 years older. That's traditional Catholic chanting. Actually, I might have that too. Hold on. To give you a comparison, it's not totally out of the ballpark. It's in a similar genre. Although this one might get me struck a little bit. I'll risk it. Let me find my index. Do I have it here? Albums. Oh, here we go. Let's see. No, I just have lady chanting. Where's my Gregorians? I'll have to find it when we get to the Catholics. I'm missing my Gregorians right now. That's fine. We'll look at them later. So, but this is a very old tradition. It's not maybe the oldest. Now, if you didn't read this story yet, we have two main characters. So, Gyo, and by the way, if you see this line, I'm going to give you a little Japanese lesson. This line here indicates a long syllable. So instead of Gyo, it's Gyo. So it's a long syllable, Gyo. So we have Gyo and Lord Kiyomori, our two main characters. Now, if you don't know who Lord Kiyomori is, he's actually the main character of this book that we're not reading. But the very first sentence says, Lord Kiyomori, who held in his hands the world within the four seas, that is Japan, dismissed censure, ignored mockery, and indulged every whim. For example, we get to learn about two dancers, Gyo and Ginyo. They're two daughters, and he finds them his favorite. So they basically join his house through dancing and being really good at it, right? So we have a dancer and the biggest lord of Japan. All right. And then she's a dancer, Gyo and her sister, and they join his court. This is great, and people are very jealous of them. So he's rich, noble, right? And he's able to join the court. So the dancer joins his court. And that's interesting, too. This is 16, if you have the PDF. They talk about why could she be successful. Some blame her name character. Now, the interesting here is the other jealous people say, quote, it all depends on the karma you bring from past lives, unquote. So people who are jealous of Gyo's success try to figure out where does it come from, what is the origin of this success. And some people just say it's her name, or some people say it's her karma. So you kind of start to see, like, how does Buddha's logic works? Now, as she is a dancer, she's now, like, permanently attached to his house, and the benefit she gets, Kiyomori takes care of her mother. Now, you might not think it's a big deal, but remember we talked about Confucianism? This idea that, like, care for your mother matters. So her payment is basically her mom gets well fed and has a mansion. So not a bad payment. Now, during this time when Gyo is living with Kiyomori, we get our next character, who's called Hotoke. Now, this is interesting. So another famous dancer appears, and she's 16. It actually tells us her age. And everyone in the city, high or low, praised her to the skies. And, quote, there have always been plenty of shirabyoshi, these are the certain kind of dancers around, but no one could ever dance like this. And then she's curious to see if she can get Lord Kiyomori to notice her, and she shows up. And this is interesting. It's on 1617. It says, Your Excellency, they told him, Hotoke Gozen is here. Everyone in the city knows her. And Kiyomori says, Here? She is an entertainer. She comes when called. The nerve of her to turn up uninvited. Kami or Hotoke, God or Buddha, she has no business appearing in Gyo's presence. Send her away. Hotoke, bluntly dismissed, was leaving, when Gyo addressed her lord and said, Master, it is formal for any dancer to present herself uninvited. Besides, they say, she is only a girl. Now that she has come so bravely, you are too harsh to order her gone. I would feel sorrow and shame for her. Her profession is mine, I understand. You need not have her dance or sing, but it would be simply a kindness to at least bring her before she goes. Please do this once and call her back. And Kiyomori, this shows you how much influence Gyo has. He changes his mind, says, fine, I'll get her back and ask her in, if you feel so strongly about it. Now he sends for this other younger dancer, and she comes in. And then he basically tells her straight up, I didn't mean to see you today, but for some reason Gyo insisted, so I humored her. Now that you're here, you might as well sing an imayo, which is a kind of popular song, especially current in this time, as the footnote mentions. And then she sings, and this is what she sings. And this is where we get some of the poetry. Seeing you, my lord, this way as never before, a maiden pine feels the gift of 1,000 years. On the tortoise island rock, rising from your lake, cranes gather in flocks, it seems, for their own delight. And these are all allusions to long life. And apparently you sing these in 3, right? She sang the song 3 times. Everyone was amazed. Lord Kiyomori seemed captivated, and he says, "Dance for me, get a drummer." And then she danced. And this picture's on 18 if you have your PDF. Actually, if you don't, I do. Where is that? Here we go. This is the picture of the dance, if you're curious. So now we have this dance, apparently very good. And here's the description. I love these descriptions, because again, this is a sung tradition, right? So we don't get to see her dance, we get to hear about it. Hotoke Gozen was a true beauty, her hair, her face, her lovely figure, her delicious living voice, her dancing could not have failed to please. By the time she had finished her dance, most unwillingly, Lord Kiyomori, entranced, could think only of her. And then now, she basically kicks... He likes her so much, he kicks poor Gyo out. That's what the second picture is. So let's go back to it. I'll minimize you, buddy. Get out of here. So Hotoki does such a good job from Gyo's kindness. Poor Gyo gets supplanted. This is very sad. Now, and he literally, if you look at 19, it says, "Gyo, leave immediately. He had her brought this order 3 times. She had long known it might end this way, but never thought yesterday or today. Repeated commands, get out now, decided her, but told herself, not until I tidy my room and remove anything unsightly. This is never too easy to part, for 2 have only just met briefly sheltering under a tree." Now this is interesting. She's heart-sick, she's crying, and then we get this picture. She writes poetry. This is what this is here. She writes it on the paper wall, and this is what she writes. "New shoots emerging, wilting fronds are equally grasses of the field. Destined every one to feel the withering touch of fall." So again, we're talking about Buddhist, what we say, Buddhist ethics, right? And this is on, if you have your PDF, you can pay attention right here. So we get this example of Buddhist ethics, right? Where we get this, like, everything is transitory and dies eventually. And then she leaves. So she rode home again in her carriage and collapsed. And her mom asked what happened, and they told her, and then her monthly rice stipend goes away, and she's totally... her life's horrible. And then what does she do? Well, if you look here, people try to get her to join them. She says no. And then she asks Gyo, "Won't you come?" And then we get this worst part. We get an embarrassment, where she gets summoned back to the court. And the mother, out of just piety to her, asks, "Would you please go to Lord Kiyomori, he's asking for you." And he basically, she gets invited because Hotoke is sad. Oh, isn't that cute? So just out of loyalty to her mom, she goes back to him, and she sings one song and is embarrassed again. Where is this? Here we go. So yeah, she basically argues with her mom for a page, and then gets disrespected by Kiyomori, and on 22 we get what she sings, while crying profusely, by the way. "The Buddha himself long ago was like anyone, and we ourselves, in time to come, will be Buddhas too. What mystery it is to share as we do the Buddha nature, yet to be so far removed from the happy state." Weeping, she sang the song through twice. The assembled Taila lords, senior nobles, privy gentlemen, ranking officials, retainers too, all of them wept with emotion. Lord Kiyomori looked pleased. "You got the feeling just right," he said. "I'd gladly see you dance too, but I'm busy today. Something has come up. Don't wait for another invitation. I want you here more often to cheer Hotoke up with your dancing and singing." Gyo could not manage to answer. She left, pressing her sleeves to her eyes. And now she went home and she said this. Where was this? She "I shrank from disobeying my mother," this is Gyo talking, "and set out a painful errand, not only to suffer a new blow. It is too much, more blows to follow if I go on. No, my mind is made up. I will throw myself into the water and drown." So she spoke, and her sister Ginyo replied, "If you drown yourself, my sister, I will too." Their horrified mother, wondering what would become of them all, she wept and strove again to talk sense into Gyo. "You have every reason to blame him," she said. "I never imagined such a thing, and I deeply regret having convinced you to go. But as her sister's going to drown herself too, she says, then what poor old mother have lost both daughters, and her life will mean nothing anymore. So she will join you to drive your mother to drown herself before her appointed time. That must be one of the 5 deadly sins. And if you're curious, what are the 5 deadly Buddha sins? It's footnote 20 here. If you have your book, and I can actually show you. I have my PDF too. Why not? Down here, it's very small. It says, patricide, matricide, killing a saint, injuring a Buddha, or sowing discord among the community of monks. So, and I'll answer questions halfway. I don't normally do this. So, one question was, how is Gil embarrassed again? Well, not only was she supplanted by a woman that she was nice to, right? She supported this other dancer. She was then invited back to entertain that dancer, and she was disrespected, which is basically your seating arrangements at these tables really matter. And instead of being prominently seated, she was seated like the worst part of the table. Let's see. And somebody said, would the concept of Gil refer to the tradition of death anniversary implemented by the Japanese? Kind of. Let's see. The way to think about this is the Japanese have a certain approach to suicide for sure, as like a life choice, you could almost say. But this is kind of like this book actually is Buddhist moral reflection. So it's kind of showing how do Buddhists address the Japanese kind of approach to easy suicide. And again, the mom says it, right? Like, it's considered a great 5 sin if you kind of force your mom into suicide. So that's the point they make here. All right. So basically they threaten to kill themselves. Now, what is actually the resolution? Well, forcing their mom to kill themselves doesn't make sense. The mom has a solution here. So the mom says, we lodge on life only briefly. Whether or not we suffer humiliation hardly matters. Besides the darkness that comes here, whatever the trials may bring, consider the horror of passing into the evil realms. So she argued her case with passionate tears, and then basically she said, well, Gyo decides to not take her life, but to become monks. So all of these 3 women become nuns. So that's their solution. And I said monks here, I should have said nuns. That's fine. You can hear me, and here I said nuns. So we have this on page 23. Gyo became a nun in her 21st year. So basically her life ended at 21. And then she moved to a hut. She made her home there. And then in her 19th year, her sister joined her. And her mother also joined her, who was 44, I think. Toji. Yeah, her mom's Toji. And they all joined here. Now, this is interesting. They mention here, and I'll explain what this means in a second. The company of her daughters gave herself to calling the name, capital N name, longing for birth in paradise. So spring fled, summer blazed, and autumn winds began to blow. And when our eyes lifted heavenwards towards the meaning of the stars, we write down our fondest wish on a mulberry paper slip, slender as a lover's oar, throwing across the celestial stream. And so they're basically, so here we go, they're basically retired and praying, and we get like 2 pages of this. And then all of a sudden, we get a knock on the door, and they panic, and they're like, what is this? And then they open the door, and it's Hotoke Gozen. If you don't remember who that is, that's the dancer who quit. The dancer who quit, or forced Gyo to quit, if you remember that. And she shows up, and I'm actually going to show this one, because this is actually the picture of it, right? This picture is the slide. This is Hotoke Gozen showing up with the mom and the 2 daughters all just praying as nuns. And then this is on page 24, if you're curious. It says, what? Hotoke Gozen? Am I dreaming and is this real? This is Gyo talking. Hotoke fought back her tears. It may shock you to hear this, she answered, but it would be wrong of me to not tell you. So here is the whole story. It was entirely my idea to present myself at Lord Kiromori's residence, when I did, and I was ordered to leave. Only your intervention convinced him to call me back. We women can so seldom follow our wishes. I wanted to leave, but he made me stay. I hated it. And then one day, he got you back and sang that song, which is Imayo. That brought it all home to me. One day, the same would happen to me. It's not like that at all. Then the poem you left on the sliding door was the one destined everyone to feel the wintering touch of fall. I knew you were right. I did not know where you had gone, but I envied you. Once I heard you had become nuns together, I kept asking to leave, but he always refused. Yeah, somebody said, what if this was a modern drama? I agree, it'd be a great modern drama. And what was the fine sin? Somebody asked. Ooh, that's a good rate. If you look on the bottom of 22, it's footnote 20. So patricide, matricide, killing a saint, injuring a Buddha, or sowing discord in the community of monks. So killing your mom, your dad, any saint, or Buddha, or sowing discord in monks. That's the mortal sin of this kind of Buddhist. So basically what happens? Well, she follows them, and then she asks, "Please forgive me my past misdeeds. Now I'm with you in the skies. And I will call the name with you until we were born together in the same lotus throne. If you prefer not to, I will wander wherever my steps lead until collapse in the moss breath of some pine, there to call the name while I have the breath to achieve the priceless rebirth in paradise." Now, so basically she begs her, can I join you guys as nuns, and can we all pray together for our mortal souls in the next life? And Gyo answers, "Why, I never imagined you feeling that way. I had no idea. Life is hard for us all. I should have accepted what happened to me solely as my own misfortune. But there have been times when we thought of you made me so bitter. I knew I would never get where I longed to go. I felt as a failure in this life and the next. But now here you are, so changed. That stubborn weakness of mine is gone. I will be reborn in paradise." So basically, by Hotoke showing up, she kind of saved Gyo. Remember we talked about Buddhism is all about attachments? It's this idea that her biggest attachment was her hate for Hotoke. So now that Hotoke showed up, they can both kind of release their, what's the word for it? They can release their attachments to this life and all find their freedom. How did Hotoke come out of Kiyomori's house? I mean, she just ran away, right? Like, it's this question somebody asked. Even the most authoritarian can't actually keep you where they want you, right? You can sneak out at night. Guards are never that effective. So she just snuck away. That's the secret answer. So then they all four become monks together to pray the name. Now, if you're wondering what this name is, I'll explain more on the next slide. But it's a type of Buddhist they are. The way you get saved is you pray the name of the Anamada Buddha, and just your pure emotion and belief in it can make you saved. You don't have to do all the steps. It's all about faith, basically. And the Amida Buddha is a Bodhisattva, which we studied last time, right? So it's this Buddha who then saves you, intercedes for you through grace, and you can be saved this time. Oh, she asked to leave. Somebody asked, but she asked to leave, and he wouldn't let her. But she could just leave like that. Well, she wanted permission to leave, right? So instead of getting permission, she just ran away. That's the secret. So again, right, she just snuck away because she realized for her immortal soul, that's what she had to do. And it mentions what her reasons for leaving. I'll actually read these. These are on 25. Reflection wields the worldly glory. For what it is, a dream in a dream. Pleasure and riches are vanity. Human birth is a rare privilege. So too, hearing the Buddha's teaching, should I now fall to the pit of hell, no eons of lives might rise me again, nor can youth save me, for many die young, and breathing out never assures that breath will pass it again. Summer heat shimmer, a flash of lightning, life vanishes more swiftly. So Hotoke basically had her Buddhist revelation that she's causing trouble and this life's transitory and all the things she's getting. She basically had a Buddhist enlightenment too and decided that this isn't enough. Somebody asked, wasn't she being watched? How could she just sneak out? Well, yeah, it's always hard to watch all the time, right? And think about it from a materialist perspective. Why would you ever run away being a dancer for a great lord? You have everything you could ever want. So the only reason to run away is a Buddhist or religious motivation, right? So I don't think he has such a big ego. If you read the rest of the book, he could never expect somebody would just run away. But it kind of shows the character of these women too, right? They're much more interested in their immortal soul than they are in, just making money. All right, we're back to this one. Now this is interesting. I'm going to read it, but I'll tell you what happens first. They actually die, and they get entered into written morals. They get written record, and they get the story of what happened. So I'm going to read this. This is on 28, if you have your slide. Actually, I can put it up. It's fine. They probably won't strike me. Here we go. It's here, right here. This is what I'm going to read. I'm circling it with my cursor. All right. And what a joy it is to be certain that I will reach my goal. This is Gyo's continued talk to Hotoke. When we become nuns, people said, and I agreed, that none like us had ever done such a thing before. The decision made sense enough. I was angry with my life and with myself, but it was nothing compared to your renouncing the world. You nursed no grudge or sorrow. In only your 17th year, you have mastered aversion to this polluted world and longing for the pure land. That, to me, is a powerful aspiration indeed. Welcome, then, friend, and guide in the teaching. Come, let us pray together. And now here's the commentary. The four of them, confined in retreat, decked the altar morning and evening with offerings of incense and flowers, praying with a single-minded devotion until each in her time reached her goal, or so they say. And sure enough, at the Chogodo, the chapel of the cloistered Emperor Go Shirakawa, the death register lists the four, altogether as departed: Gyo, Ginyo, Hotoke, Toji. Their story is profoundly moving. What's the implication there? They all literally prayed until they died. But remember, it says they reached their goal, which means they've separated attachments, they left this life, and to be entered in the book of the cloistered emperor basically means they made it. They made it to nirvana. That's what they're saying. And somebody asks, is this story just how to teach people let go of attachments through prayer? Yes. So it's actually, interesting enough, this book is a Buddhist moral epic, but it's non-fiction. What I mean is it's a slightly fictionalized account. It's actually more correctly to say it's an oral tradition of a historical event. So stuff like this, you can say, did these people really exist? Probably. Can I prove that they became monks? No. But does it really show how, like, Buddhist thought works with attachments? Yes, exactly. So it shows how about losing attachments to this life, and these are at the last line, right? Their story is profoundly moving. So it shows that, like, this is the end goal of Buddhists, right? And these women did it right. So again, they're kind of, in a Buddhist epic, they're heroes. So they're beautiful and good dancers. They had everything their lives could desire, especially Hotoke, right? And they gave it all up to get this non-material reality. All right, any questions about this? And somebody says, this is interesting, Hotoke's revelation reminds me a lot of Mark 8:36. It's a Bible reference, right? But it's this idea that this transitory world is a temporary thing, right? So it's all going to be, it's the renouncing the world is a very common trend in almost every religion, purely because it's this is the challenge, right? Like, do you go for stuff, or do you focus on spiritual satisfaction, revelation? Because a student asked this question, I'm going to just read the source, because I have all the books in my house, because I'm a nerd. Let's see, yeah, to quote what the question of student Mark 8:36 is, for what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Yeah, exactly. So it's that idea that if you had all the material things, but to gain it you harm someone, right, and you lose your soul, what's the benefit you get? And a Buddhist would say there's no benefit, right? That stuff is a distraction. Here's the thing too, right? A Christian would argue a similar thing. We'll talk about the Christian philosophy next class. But a Christian would argue too, it's, basically it. And let's see what other questions we got. So did they reach enlightenment? Yes. To answer the question, so being written in that book is like a confirmed, it's like the headquarters of their sect of Buddhism. They made it to, like, paradise. And this form of Buddhism, not only do they add grace, but Pure Land Buddhists actually believe in, like, a specific paradise. So it's not non-existence, it's paradise existence. So they definitely change it. And somebody asks, so the moral of the story is that you can achieve something more than worldly desires through prayer and reaching nirvana. Yes. And actually, the moral of the story is, too, that's all that really matters, and all of this is distractions. And it's like a person choosing to be materialistic. Or to flip it around, Mark, it's the opposite, right? It's somebody choosing, they have all those material advantages, and they instead choose the opposite, right? They could have all these material benefits, but instead they choose the immaterial benefits, right? They choose this, focusing on the eternal things. And again, remember, this is a 800-year-old story, and they basically make women the religious heroes. And it's not the only time. Actually, the whole end of the book, I almost picked this one. It's called the Initiates book. I'll have to upload a picture when I get a chance. It's about an empress, I think, or a famous noble lady who becomes, let's see. It's actually about her specifically going to join the Buddha. I'll have to upload the picture next time. But yeah, it's a very interesting note here. So great, yeah, exactly. So it's this focus, this is a great example of the kind of Buddhist focus on not material. Somebody says, if I didn't read it, should I read it? Well, let me say it this way. If you were a logical human being, would you say that perhaps I might use this on an examination? If you think I may, you should read it. Is it hard? It's not a hard read. It might be the easiest thing we've read all class. If you ask me, except for the names, it's probably pretty easy. I'd take a gander at it if I were you. All right. Any other Gil questions before I move on? But very honest person. I won't knock you for that. It's an honest question. I would read it. I think it makes, especially because we're going to be doing we're not doing in-class writing anymore, right? You have to write at home. So it's good to have reference to it. At least know what you're talking about if you have to write it on a paper, for example. All right. Great, we got some good stuff here. All right, so we're going to move on, and actually I'm going to explain the kind of Buddhists these people are. And again, one reason I show you that is because I think it's way better to let Buddhism's definitely one of those religions where, it's explained best by its stories. And to be fair to all of them, I think they all are, too. You could say Christianity is Islam, right? The stories kind of demonstrate way better than the pure, just me explaining it intellectually. So that's kind of the attempt what we're doing there. All right. Okay, next one. What is Pure Land Buddhism? This is interesting. This is the one we just did, actually. So, one spoiler I forgot to say. If you're actually curious about Tale of the Heike, not just Gyo, the next 4 weeks in my 306 class, Asia Studies 306, I am going over, we're actually reading the whole Tale of the Heike. So if you want to poke around, I mean, it's a live stream, right? So you can still just watch it if you want, if you're curious. So, or you can take the class in the future. But if you just want to see it first, you could actually go see it. You could see, at least hear me talk about the whole book. So, all right. So Pure Land Buddhism. It's still 18 to 20% of Japanese Buddhists, and actually it's a fresh school in this time of this book's coming out. So this was actually marketing. Spoiler. Yes, you could spoil the class for yourself, and then take the class in the future, and you know what to expect. It's up to you. If you want to spoil it, it's fine. If you don't. So at the time this book's written, it was established about 25 to 50 years ahead of that. Now, what made Pure Land so popular and why it's so popular is what you saw in this story. And it's addressed to laity and monks. Oh, great. The jokes are for days. Thank you, folks. I can't help but chuckle. All right. So what this means is addressed to laity and monks is what you saw in the story, right? It's if you chant this name, if you say the Amida Buddha and you do the Amida Buddha chants with enough passion, that's all that's required to get you to nirvana. Like, not just passion, but faith. If you really believe it, then that's what'll get you there. So, laity and monks have both equal access. And actually, in the Tale of the Heike, if you read it, yes, sometimes I repeat words, especially if I'm about myself. I can't help it. I'll work on it, but, no guarantees. I'm a Californian. I might say too much. I can't help it. I don't have anyone make fun of me in front of my face. You can make fun of me in the chat, though. It's okay. So, in this story, a lot of the warriors would literally, before they get killed, would say, they'd, kneel down and say, hey, let me chant the name 10 times before you kill me, because I just want to go to the afterlife. And other warriors would wait to kill a guy to let him do his Buddhist chants and then kill him. So a regular warrior who in normal Buddhism has too bad of karma and could never go to nirvana, now all of a sudden they have this one chance to go, and it's to monks too, right? And it's almost like there's not a guarantee, but the Amida Buddha and Pure Land Buddhism can actually reach out for you and kind of, if somebody says, is it a Hail Mary? It's like a Hail Mary, exactly. It's not that different. It's an intercession. So the Amida Buddha intercedes for you, and if you believe it strongly enough, that's it, you're in. You don't have to do anything else. Which, again, that's very appealing, right? Doing it forever is really depressing, if you think about it, right? And we heard it in the quote from Gyo, right? Hotoke was worried about being trapped in the endless cycle for eons, which, by the way, Buddhists do have a kind of hell. And somebody says, so Pure Land is the name of domination? Yes. So in the story, they talk about the Pure Land. That's how you know they're Pure Land Buddhists, but it's their denomination. So the Pure Land means they actually believe in an afterlife. And then it explains why the Amida Buddha is great. And mostly, did I have it on here? Hold on. Oh yeah. What makes the Amida Buddha great? Amida is a specific Buddha, but it's this key philosophy. It's grace as a core ethic. So it's through faith, grace, right? So if you have enough, again, if you're like, Professor, this sounds a little bit Christian-y. Yes. Now, do I know if there's an influence? Perhaps, because it is 1,000 years post-Christ, right? So is there a chance that, some of that percolated into China? Oh, sure. Do I know it? I can't prove it. But it's, there's a chance here, right? They have to wrestle with this. What about grace? Pure Land Buddhism really has this answer. So grace is this core ethic. So through faith, you can kind of save yourself the first time. And how do you get there? It's the recitation of sutras, and this is from Morgan. She only says the recitation of sutras, but actually, more importantly, there's actually like the Hail Mary, there's specific chants and prayers you can say that would kind of demonstrate your dedication to the Amida, and then through that you could be saved this life, regardless of your karmic load or anything. Which is nice if you're a warrior or a normal person or a neurotic dancer. And basically that's what they were, by the way. Like, it doesn't matter if the dances were erotic. The euphemism of living with a noble all the time. I mean, do you have to be that creative to think about what that actually means? I hope not. Alright, any other questions? We're going to actually go into other kinds of Buddhism, but Pure Land's a great place to start, as kind of, you can see very clearly from Gyo, I think, these differences. I'm now just sipping my non-caffeinated beverage. That was a mistake. I can't tell if it's sarcastic or not. These headlines are great. Okay, question. Ninjas used to make hand signs in symbol of prayer for protection. Was this another denomination of Buddhism? Oh yeah, that. Okay, yeah. So I just said it. I didn't actually tell you in the headline. But if they're using any kind of prayer or chants or signals, they may be Buddhist. What I say is, I have to know the specifics. In Japan, there's a lot of syncretism between three things: Shinto, which is the domestic religion; Buddhism, which is what we're talking about; and a lot of Chinese. As we talked about in Taoism, a lot of Taoist numerology and magic also makes its way into Japan. So you kind of have to figure out which of the schools it is. Does this make sense? So, and yeah. Can I explain why the Amida Buddha is great? Okay, yeah. So it is very general, because I'm trying to force you guys to listen. But okay, I'll explain that again. That's a good question to ask. So, why the Amida Buddha is great? So remember how we talked about Bodhisattva? Amida Buddha is the Bodhisattva, their favorite of Pure Land. They basically pick their favorite. So Buddhists generally don't say until the modern period that like other Buddhists are so wrong. They do that nowadays. It's a very modern invention. But Pure Land Buddhists, the Amida Buddha is a Bodhisattva, right? So it's one of these people who help you get to nirvana. And for them, she's the greatest, or he's the greatest, because he intercedes for anyone at any time, purely based on faith. So the greatness is that second point, right? The grace as a core ethic for anyone, regardless of your karmic load. So no matter how much you harm other creatures, or how bad you are at the Eightfold Path, if you have enough faith, that can save you alone. So purely faith can save you. For the Catholics or Christians in the room, or the Protestants, I guess, would like this. Not works, faith, right? So Pure Land Buddhists are faith-based Buddhists, not work-based. So most Buddhists would say, of course it's faith too. It'd be like the Catholics or Protestant things, but Pure Land Buddhists are almost exclusively grace and faith. That's kind of the big pillar of Pure Land. And I don't see any other questions, but if they pop up, I'll answer them. Oh my gosh, everything's pinging today. Please stop. Alright, PowerPoint. Here we go. Okay, next one. We're going to get into the most famous school of Japanese Buddhism a little bit. And I got to get my other book back out. We're going to talk about Zen Buddhism a little bit. Because I feel like if I skip Zen, I'm doing a disservice to all Japanese Buddhism. Alright, so Zen started in China even earlier, in the 470s. Now, why do we care about this? Well, this is interesting. Of other kinds of Buddhism, Zen, it focuses on mind-to-mind sharing. Now, if you're like, Professor, does this mean they're like Star Trek, like hand-mind melds? Kind of. Actually, Star Trek's copying Zen Buddhism. But more important, it's a focus on learning from a master. Again, very Chinese, right? Think about Taoism. Instead of focused on texts. Zen Buddhists do have texts, but they don't find them necessary for salvation. Now, this is a Morgan thing I'm going to cross out, so don't write this on your test. She says it's more philosophy than other forms. I have no idea what this means. I don't know if I can answer your question, where is the Kush, but I'll address it at the end of the slide. Oh, okay. Now, Zen's number one emphasis is on meditation. Now, what does this mean? The emphasis on meditation specifically, they have almost an exclusive emphasis on meditation. That's what it should say. Not just an emphasis on meditation, but it's like meditation above all other means. And when I say meditation, I mean not just like like recitation of a sutra or prayers. That's different. They mean just sitting still and meditating in quiet. That's what they mean. So not really saying the sutras, not really praying, not really doing things, just meditation. This is big in Zen. Now, how much is it significant? It's about 8% of Japan right now. However, since the 19th and 20th century, it's really big in the US and Europe, especially Germany. Something about Germans really love Zen. It does help one of their modern thinkers, who we are going to talk about, Immanuel Kant, basically intuited Zen principles. All right. Now, what's the goal of Zen enlightenment? It's called Satori, which is enlightenment and new understanding in a flash of inspiration. So Zen monks think you can have pure enlightenment in moments of a Christian or a Westerner might call it epiphany or theophany, right? Like God touches you and you have inspiration. This is the Zen Buddhist version, where like the universe, the absolute, gives you this flash of inspiration. So through meditation, you get this goal of understanding. But flashes of inspiration, not long work necessarily. And now this is interesting. They doubled down on that kind of illogicness of Buddhism, where you bypass all logical and analytical ways of looking at the world, and you're focusing on trying to get this great bursts of inspiration. And time for questions. I already got a couple here. What do they do in meditation exactly? I have a picture, actually. We're actually going to talk about the details, the person who asked that question. Zen Buddhists, they sit in a certain posture, which I'll show you a quick version of it, and then I'll explain what we do in it. So the way it looks is this one. Oh, that's really low resolution on my screen, wow. So it's sitting in this, what you'd call a traditional pose, not moving, silent, with a monk with a stick who's going to smack you. But while you're meditating, you're actually thinking about specific things, and we'll talk about those on the next slide. That's a great question, actually. Let me go to my Zen slide. Here we go. Man, I answered the question on the next slide. Great. And then somebody says, are people forced into Buddhism through their parents or because they choose to be Buddhist? Great question. I think it's like everything else. There's probably, what would I call them? I've heard them called flotsam people, right? So some people are into religion just because the water they're in's into it. Some people choose it, like grow up in it and then choose it as adults. Some find it as adults. I think religion's all three. So Buddhism's probably the same as everything else, right? So there's probably a lot of cultural Buddhists, like people who just grow up in it. There's probably even more people who, that's probably a majority. And then a lot of people probably grow up in it and then choose to do it as adults. And then some convert as adults as well. I would say it's probably fair of all big religions. So there's kind of an atheist petard, which is that only people only believe in religion when they grow up in it, but that doesn't explain religious growth. So just something to point out. Oh, that's not. Don't open Steam. Okay, so let's get into the next slide, which does answer some of these questions as well. Do I have any other questions? Nope. Let's keep going. All right. So the biggest how to meditate in Zen, I actually have that. I almost forgot. It's called Zazen, which is sitting meditation. This is what we're focusing on. So your focus is on sitting meditation specifically. They do have other forms, though. Now, the goal is to control your thought through no thought, and I'll explain how they do this. You do it with something called, you do it in combination with a thing called a koan. A koan is basically a contradictory question with no answer. And by meditating on it, you get that satori, that sudden enlightenment, and you can see the thing you're meditating on doesn't make any sense. And that show you that reality itself isn't true reality. All right, and it comes from China, in the Tang dynasty. So the 6th to 9th century China. All right, and koan are basically paradoxical riddles whose answers bring enlightenment. And answer is a non-answer. I'll show you what this means in a second, though. Just trust me for now. They don't have correct answers, or maybe any answer. Now, how it works in a system is this. So you have an abbot, that's a leader of your monastery. And by the way, we're going back. Zen also is focused mostly on monks, but there is a normal person way too. I'll explain that in a little bit. So the abbot gives you a question. Then you meditate for long periods of time. Then you you think of your answers while you're meditating. You bring them to the abbot, and the abbot then does a Q&A and sees if you made progress or not, and then you do it all over again. You get a new koan, you meditate again. And this leads to what the Zen Buddhists call a breakdown. It's actually a mental breakdown, not even a joke. It's called the Great Doubt, where you doubt the structure of reality itself, and this leads to stop intellectualizing about it, right? So the goal is to not over-intellectualize it and kind of embrace these contradictions. And then finally, it leads to something called the Great Death. Now, this is, again, we're talking about parallels with Buddhism and Christianity sometimes. This doesn't mean you actually die. It means like you die to the material world die. So it's the death of like your connection to this physical reality, not actually dying. And then you see what's behind the curtain, basically. Alright, we have one more explanation slide, and then we're just going to read koan. They're very fun. If you have any questions, ask them, and I'll do them as we go. Okay. From Zen, The History of Zen Buddhism, that book we used last week, we get a couple choice quotes here, which I don't plan to skip. So, for example, he has these quotes. First, Mahayana origins. Zen is basically Mahayana origins and specific impulse of the Japanese spirit. Or the Chinese spirit. See, even it gets me sometimes. Now, this is very interesting because it shows that he points out that religion is specific sometimes. Oh, and somebody asks, is a koan a philosophical question? I'll show what they are. Yes, they're philosophical questions with no correct answers. And somebody says, can you go back really quick so I can take a picture of the end? After the stream, you can go back and see it yourself. So I'll leave it up. Another question was, so Zen Buddhists meditate and think about a bunch of questions until they go crazy. Yeah, well, we might say they go crazy, but they would say they're free of the constraints of this reality. And you'll see what I mean when I get to the examples. And they're not crazy, like they know what they're doing, but they just choose to not use this reality as their answer. Now, this is interesting too. All mysticism is conditioned in character by the spiritual setting in which it originated and flourished. Zen is stamped with the Chinese and Japanese religiosity of Mahayana Buddhism. So it's this idea that these are very specifically Japanese and Chinese. And let's see, what else do I have here? And there's a core of here that Zen Buddhism, to kind of understand it. There's a core of negativism, paradox, religious experience as intuitive cognition, and the comprehension of things in their thusness. I love this quote. I couldn't even skip it. It was amazing. So, and let me find where I got this. I'm just flipping through my book. So he compares this. I'm going to read this comparison. So, while the Bodhisattva saves all being, no form of sentient being enters his mind, since knowledge abides in emptiness. As an embodiment of the cosmic wisdom, he is, at least theoretically, an impersonal being. For the same reason, the suspended attitude of the Bodhisattva is basically different from the detached love of a Christian saint. This is where you get a comparison, which is interesting. Quote, for the saint who remains unattached to his acts of charity, looking alone to God, whose right hand knows not what the left hand does, Matthew 6:3, realizes within himself full personal freedom. He recognizes his love for his fellow person in the God whom his spirit ascends in untrammeled flight. The act of love which he performs for the sake of God is not, for the reason, any less real. The recipient is indeed enriched. Something actually happens, and that it should happen, and the manner in which it happens are important. The Bodhisattva ideal exercised a persistent influence on the whole of Buddhism, particularly Zen, as it did bear rich fruit. So it's this idea, kind of, that there's a very different east-west look here on how this works. And then what is it focusing on is very different, right? You're focusing on these religious experiences and comprehension of their thusness. Now, interesting too, I'm going to point this out before I give you koan examples, and it'll be free. The Chinese Zen enlightenment focuses on daily life. Like if you've ever seen a rock garden, those are Zen gardens. It's the idea that doing regular thing can lead to your enlightenment. Zen are very big on this. So this is what they believe can save you. So it doesn't actually, meditation doesn't have to be just sitting. As long as you're focused on your task and kind of meditating on the universe, anything can lead to Satori. And they get this from Chinese Zen. It's very Taoist, and in, like, if you remember our Butcher Ting example, the guy who could cut using the Wei, Zen is very heavily influenced by that. And if you have questions about this, please ask. Otherwise, we'll go into koan. All right. Let's get into what a koan is. These are fun. Oh. Okay, I'm just going to leave that one alone. That was funny. God, I love people. Okay. The internet is my favorite. I never will get tired of this baby. Okay, let's do some koan and then be free. Okay, so for example, these are the kind of things a novice would get, these little short ones. What is your original face before you were born? This is a koan, right? So you basically sit and you meditate about this. What is your original face before you're born? And when they say born, what we mean is conceived. That would be the best translation I found. So what was your face like before you were even conceived? Good question. Or another one. Shuzan held out his short staff and said, if you call this a short staff, you oppose reality. But if you do not call it a short staff, you ignore the fact. Now, what do you wish to call this? Good question, right? So both answers are wrong. Okay, then what's the answer? Right? Think about it. And then this one, too. When you can do nothing, what can you do? Or, what is the sound of one hand clapping? And I'm just imagining everyone here doing the one hand clap. That's not what he's asking. Like, what's the sound of one hand, like, whooshing through the air by itself? That's kind of what he's asking. And again, you're supposed to meditate these, not like for 5 minutes, but like a day or a week, right? And you have to, like, think of answers, and then you might have answers, then you go to your abbot, and he might just say they're all bad answers. And then you have to do it again, and you do it again. And this is just the kind of the goal of a Zen monk, and you do this till it kind of changes your way of thinking. All right, now let's do the second set, and we're almost out of time, so this will be perfect. So now, if you get advanced, you actually get long koan. So here's an example of a longer koan. 2 monks were arguing about the temple flag waving in the wind. One said, the flag moves. The other said, the wind moves. They argued back and forth, but could not agree. Hui Nang, the 6th patriarch, said, gentlemen, it is not the flag that moves. It is not the wind that moves. It is your mind that moves. The two were struck with awe. And if you notice, right, the structure of this is almost Confucian in the way it's written. So it's very heavily influenced from China. But you start to get this, oh wow, this is, I can see the non-logic of this. All right. Now here's one of the founders of the Buddhism of Japan. Somebody asked this one. A monk asked Kengon, how does an enlightened one return to the ordinary world? Talking about Bodhisattva, right? Kengon replied, a broken mirror never reflects again. A fallen flower never goes back to its old branches. So, is there some wisdom here? Probably. Is it easy to, like, wrap your head around these? Not necessarily. I've never spent a substantial amount of time at a Zen monastery, so I can't tell you how well these koan work. But it's a huge tradition that is quite popular, so I just want to give you this little introduction. And this is probably the most detail we'll get in Buddhism. But it looks like I'm right on time, too. So any questions you have, now is the time. Here's our fine monk with the stick again, if you're curious. So, conclusion, if you have questions, now's the time to ask. And then, if you... Oh, I have a couple questions. Let's see. Are Jedi Buddhist monks? Good question. Well, it's more like George Lucas ripped off Buddhism to make his show, yes. So, and by rip off, of course, we say tribute. Star Wars is kind of a tribute to Buddhism in some ways, like funeral practices and the way he explains the universe. So it's very, we'd call it Eastern mysticism, which is basically like when a Westerner kind of focuses on the East, but not too deep. People seem to not want to get into depth all the time, which is kind of depressing. Somebody asked if I'm a Jedi. No, because they're not real. Besides, I don't want to join the team that always loses. That's depressing. All right, we're almost out of time, folks. Oh, how about Enter the Dragon? It's a good question. I'll have to hold off on that one. Oh, quick question about the e-readings. Do we have to do notes for them or not? Yeah, Kunika, great question. Yes, the notes, I will also give you reading points for those notes too. If you do the e-readings, they're also worth reading points. So when I give you reading points, they don't necessarily have to be literally every reading, but like show me a reading every week. That's what I'm looking for. So if you happen to do the e-reading, that is a good one to show me notes for. Now all your notes can basically be typed. So it works out. Alright folks, we're out of time. If you have any extra questions, I'll answer them in the Discord. For non-students or random people watching this later, this has been my third lecture on Buddhism. I hope you found it interesting. Gyo is free to read in the Tale of the Heike, so you should go find it yourselves. So thank you all for listening to the stream. Great.